Our first daughter was raped at 14 and we raised the baby as our own child. Our first daughter committed suicide and we carried on raising the baby. My grandchild thinks we're her parents and I can't bring myself to tell her the truth even now. This is a lengthy confession. I'm sorry if you don't like reading long posts, you can skip to the end if you want. Our first daughter was raped when she was 14. It destroyed her childhood and flipped our lives upside down. You always assume if you bring your child up right and take care of them nothing bad will happen, but something bad just happened anyway and there was nothing we could do afterwards to make what happened right. The man who did it got sent to jail eventually, but our daughter was never the same again. Counseling never brought her smile back, nothing seemed to work. She seemed so cold and emotionally dead from there onward and we tried so hard to connect back with her but nobody could. She was an island and didn't want to talk to anyone about anything. We as parents blamed ourselves for this. We ended up pulling our daughter out of school to homeschool her because her attendance was very bad and she suffered night terrors which kept her awake some nights. It was probably a bad decision and overprotective parenting, but we wanted to protect her and felt a regular school wasn't a safe environment for her at the time. As if the situation could be any worse, we found out our daughter was pregnant with the rapist's child. We tried to suggest an abortion because of her age and the situation, but she didn't want to. Our daughter refused to abort the pregnancy, so we kept her out of school to give birth to the baby. We raised the child as our second daughter to give our first daughter the life she was robbed. We just wanted her to enjoy her life and told her we'd raise the baby for her as her sibling and she agreed to this. It was partly out of fear of what the neighborhood would think, and partly out of wanting our daughter to continue having a normal teenage life. It wasn't ideal, but things worked for a time and our daughter got to see her daughter whenever she wanted, which was better than giving the baby up to adoption. Things didn't last this way for long though, as our daughter's mental health started to deteriorate. When our first daughter started to become heavily suicidal, there was nothing we could do because every time we tried to get closer to her she'd push us away worse than before. She was hospitalized several times for suicide attempts until she succeeded in committing suicide. This destroyed us. At first we hated the baby and blamed it. We blamed it for the death of our daughter and were in denial it was our fault. Eventually though we realized we were to blame, not the child who was brought into the world by no fault of their own. We'd focused for so long on the fact it was half of the rapist's child, that we'd overlooked the fact it was also half of our daughter. It took a lot of time to come to this conclusion, but we'd always looked after the baby out of respect to our daughter. The thought of giving it up to adoption went through my mind several times, but I knew my daughter didn't want this and so did my wife. We gave our daughter the best life we could. We bought her anything she could ever want, took her to concerts and on holidays. We even sent her to a private school despite the extra expense with hopes that she will become successful in life and live the life our daughter never got to live. She is home right now and whenever she hugs me or my wife and says, "I love you Mom/Dad," it hurts like a dagger through our hearts. I always look towards my wife every time our daughter says it. She finds it as painful as I do and I can tell by the look in her eyes. It's not that we don't love her, it's that her entire life is being lived believing a lie. We're actually her grandparents and she has no idea of this. She's never asked if we're really her true parents because obviously she has never had a reason to. Part of me though believes lying by omission is still lying though. We've never told her the truth about her sister being her mother. She knows her sister committed suicide, but she is too young to remember her. I feel as though we're protecting her from being damaged and hurt by keeping her oblivious to all of this. Maybe I'm just being selfish, maybe my wife is too. We just don't want to see her suffer. The thought of her not being strong enough to hear the truth scares me the most. I know I shouldn't compare her to my other daughter, but I would never forgive myself if she committed suicide too after learning the truth. I cannot lose both of them, I can't survive another loss like this. The whole situation is soul-crushing. The only person I can talk to is my wife. It feels like some massive thing nobody else can ever know. Not even our parents know the truth. ReadIT, what would you have done in the same situation? A penny for your thoughts in the comments. Now to the Reddit side of view. Purple Pigeon 1672. I have a very similar experience. Before I left for college, my mom came to me with tears in her eyes and said we needed to talk. She told me that when she was 16 she had a baby, and because of her age and religion, her family decided it would be best if the child grew up thinking she was another sister in the family. My mom was crying by the time she said my aunt was actually my half-sister. She thought I was gonna be mad or something. I told her that it didn't matter at all and gave her a big hug. It's funny now because every now and then I have to remind myself she is my sister, and when I call her sis we both smile and chuckle. Break that fast. This happened to a good friend of mine. He was living with his sister and cousin off and on when they came to the States. He was told both his parents were dead. They broke it to him when he was 21-ish. The sister was his biological mother and the cousin was his biological half-sister. This apparently happened a lot several decades ago when kids were had out of wedlock. Bobby Darin had this happen where his grandmother raised him as his mother and his thought-to-be sister was actually his mother. Atom Bomb Babby. My ex-boyfriend's father was raised by his grandparents believing that his mother was his sister because she had gotten pregnant and wasn't fit enough to be able to care for him. They waited until he was older and at a more stable place in life to tell him, and he was shocked and hurt at first, but he grew to accept it and he continued to love his grandparents as his parents because they were the ones that loved him and raised him. I would say wait until she is older, but telling her when you know she will understand is a better option. She loves you, and that won't change. Atom Bomb Babby. My ex-boyfriend's father was raised by his grandparents believing that his mother was his sister because she had gotten pregnant and wasn't fit enough to be able to care for him. They waited until he was older and at a more stable place in life to tell him, and he was shocked and hurt at first, but he grew to accept it and he continued to love his grandparents as his parents because they were the ones that loved him and raised him. I would say wait until she is older, but telling her when you know she will understand is a better option. She loves you, and that won't change. Chelsmoto. I would seek therapy for you and your wife, not just for guilt, but also to figure out what to do. In the day and age of at-home DNA kits, this secret won't stay secret forever. I've heard so many stories of families finding out secrets similar to this because of test results, or someone catching on to something. This can't stay secret forever. I definitely think it best that it comes from you, guided by a professional, versus her finding out a different way. Edit, spelling. Edit 2. For those that keep pointing out that her grandparents have the same DNA, I'm fully aware. The problem that could arise with the at-home DNA test, think 23andMe, and tests of the like, is that anyone from her bio dad's family that has taken the test will show up in her DNA network online. Which would raise questions for as to why she is related to those people. Eder var. You write all this with a tone of self-guilt, and I understand your worries, but the most important thing I get from the facts of your story is that you and your wife are outstandingly good people. Your daughter got raped and you did everything you could for years, and you are also trying your best with your second daughter. Whatever the outcome, I think that at some point the basic work you have to do will be about yourselves, giving you the credit, the love and the self-pride that you obviously deserve. You cannot care for others all the time if there is no self-care at some point. Sour Seshabialta. What you may not have yet accepted is that the person you raised, loved and sent to private school is your daughter. Each time she tells you she loves you, it shouldn't feel like a dagger. It is her way of telling you that you are amazing parents. You have experienced a tremendous amount of pain while sparing her of this same pain. I'm not sure what one could hope by telling someone they are not their parents, they are the product of a rape and that their mother committed suicide. This is your decision and you might benefit from seeing a therapist who specializes in trauma to ensure you have professional advice and support. You are good parents. You are raising a healthy, thriving daughter. She is lucky to have you. Take comfort in this fact and that your first daughter left behind such a wonderful contribution to the world and someone who makes you smile each day. Later 7. I really am so sorry this happened to you. So very sorry. You are doing your best and your daughter did her best too after the horrific event she went through. You and your wife are very good parents by sheet evidence of your loss. Your granddaughter is truly your special daughter. There is no rush on telling news. She isn't emotionally ready or you would be writing a different letter no doubt. When you all felt empty you looked outwards to make your granddaughter and daughter got the help they needed. I cannot imagine how she would have felt. But she is at peace now. I'd say she'd be delighted to see how you raised her baby. She is your daughter's little girl and you continued to do what's right for your daughter and family. She wanted to keep her baby it seems and you honored her wishes to ease her trauma and pain. Even though you all must have been overwhelmed with confusion and a conflicted mind. Amazing grandparents. She loves you and guilt is a pretty useless emotion in this case. You feel heartache but guilt for raising a lovely young woman is misplaced. Your daughter loved you both too and her little girl. In the face of evil you did good. And everything will happen in its own time. What amazing parents to both girls. Don't feel guilty for worrying about neighbors. No doubt this was your holding on to a semblance of normality in the face of trauma. You have raised a child who says, I love you, in spite of all the sorrow you went through she feels love. Why? Because she has had it poured into her by you, your wife and by your daughter may she rest in peace. You did your utmost with what you could and you still do. Be easy on yourselves and imagine this little girl loves you as parents. That's just how good a grandfather and grandmother you both are. Bless you. Chozal. This actually brought tears to my eyes for so many reasons. All I can say is it's extremely brave for you to endure all this pain in order for another human being to not suffer. As someone who has endured so much suffering in life and has suicidal thoughts, it would be so nice if someone was able to take on the pain and the suffering I've had due to my experiences. Albeit a lot of my suffering came from parental neglect and you have done the opposite. With DNA tests available now, my fear is that she will eventually find out, but I hope that even if that was true she would someday understand the insurmountable suffering this situation has caused you both and obviously your daughter that has passed. I don't know how old this child is now, but I can only imagine her finding the right coping mechanisms and gain a better understanding of your decisions in her 30s. I believe in my heart you have made the right, most selfless decision. An unbelievable burden to bear and the most sacrificial. I am in awe of your strength and I know the pain, and the easier thing to do would be to tell her everything. It would make your burden so much lighter and would help you both so much not to live in this lie. This would be the selfish thing to do because yes, she would suffer for so many reasons now, finding out so late that she was product of rape, that her mother killed herself because of how she was conceived. I can only again resonate in the fact that if it was me and I was that child, that is the most kindness thing you can do for her is to bear this burden. And it brings me so many tears to know that people like you exist and would sacrifice themselves to make someone's life easier. From someone who has never experienced sacrificial love from my parents, this is what love does look like, and you obviously love her very much. Catbed Paradise. OP, it sounds like you've had no help with your grief. It's awful to lose a child at all, and your pain is compounded 1,000,000 times by the violence that was done to her and your feelings of helplessness to relieve her pain. Also, it seems that you've taken some of your deceased daughter's false self-blame for getting raped. That was BS for her and BS for you. Please get grief counseling, at the very least, so the very real love in your family is not tainted by so much misplaced guilt and shame. You're doing an incredible thing for your second daughter. Telling her about your first daughter can come in time. But first, please get some help with your overwhelming grief. Snarkophilus. I'm so sorry to hear of your loss and your pain. A few things to think about, though. First, when you say you've never had the nerve to tell her, would telling her actually be the right thing to do? Would it help her in any way? Or would it just cause her a lot of needless anxiety and heartache? How would knowing this help her? Maybe someday, after she's an adult, there might come a time, but as a kid, something like this wouldn't help her at all, and personally I'd say you're doing the right thing by not telling her. It's an adult kind of problem, and she's not an adult. Don't burden her with it, and don't feel guilty for not telling her. Secondly, you and your wife aren't treating her as if she's your daughter, she is your daughter, in every way that matters. She's basically an adopted child. People adopt children all the time, usually ones that don't have any biological connection to them, unlike this girl. Adopted parents are real parents. And adopted children are real children. For your own sake and your child's, please, do your best to put the tragic past behind you and just be happy and grateful that you have this loving, happy child to call your own. Many people aren't so lucky. Just treat her as loving parents do, and you'll be doing all of you a great kindness. Rocky Dale. You, your daughter and your grandchild have gone through hell. Your story has moved me more than most on Reddit. To tell a child, no matter what age, 8 or 28, that he is the product of rape is not a good thing. Lying to your child/grandchild isn't good either, but you must consider what is best for them. If I were your child/grandchild I'd rather not know. It would feel as if I were the reason for my mum's suicide, and the guilt I would then carry for the rest of my life could be unbearable. It sounds selfish, and I'm sorry for your loss, but speaking brutally, something good has come from the very nasty situation. You have a beautiful child. They will never replace the loss of your daughter. You can never undo the horrific act that happened to your daughter. But you can, and from the way you have described the situation, still care for the child and bring him/her up in a safe environment and love them. If I was in their situation, I'd rather never know the real truth, and live a life of life, and be happy. I don't see how telling the vile truth will ever end happily. Cone 1230. I want to start off by saying you and your wife are selfless, beautiful souls. This story is truly heartbreaking, for many reasons. You did right by your daughter, you too did everything in your power to make her okay again. I know it's easier said than done, but you should never blame yourself for what happened, and I hope you know wonderful you are. You and your wife did what was best, at the time, given the situation. If I can offer any advice, it would be to tell your second daughter with the help of a trusted and professional therapist. You want to do this the right way, if there is such a thing. Talk about your story. You may be able to help others who are facing similar heartbreak. I wish my parents were as selfless and wonderful as the two of you. Telling her will change your lives completely, but make no mistake, your lives don't have to change in a negative way. This process will take time, dedication and love, all of which, I can see you already have. I say that with confidence. I hope coming out to Reddit has helped you. Good luck, my friend. Samuel 2:14. When she graduates college you can think of talking to her about it. Let her get on her own adult feet. She isn't living a lie. She is your daughter even if she is also your granddaughter. Genetics don't matter except for in health and genealogy. It may be partly your fault for the path. But the result is unforeseen. Support your daughter the best you can and one day, you should tell her. But she needs to understand that you weren't protecting her. You were blind as to what damage it could do to a young mind. It shouldn't hurt like a dagger eventually. You have only lived for her life. You are a good person and don't fret. Things sound surprisingly great. Please don't forget that dwelling in the past is very unhealthy, that you are living for your first daughter. Doing exactly what she would have wanted for her daughter. It isn't selfish to not tell her, and you need to know that you have time. Just pay attention. Keep her sharp and know how to take care of herself. The only thing you can regret is not honoring your family. Which I would be surprised if you managed to do. Mainly, because you have done anything and everything a parent would do in this matter. You are one of the strongest individuals I have ever heard of. Please 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 remember you are her rock. You are Dad. I would have given anything for a father like you. Even if he was my grandpa. Just be there, okay? Don't let pain creep into your heart when she says she lives you. Because she would regardless if you were Dad or not. You'd love her the same. It's going to be okay. D3 Spirito 13. This is very similar to my story, but without the sad circumstances. My heart really goes out to you guys, as I can only imagine how difficult this is. It's a real catch-22 situation as to whether you tell her or not now or wait till she's older. I spent the first 13 years of my life believing that my biological grandparents were my parents and that my biological mother was my sister. It was an unbelievable shock to find out the truth, and I started suffering from bad panic attacks, which I'm really only getting to grips with over the past few years. It's a huge thing for a person to find out, especially a kid who is in the middle of puberty and likely already dealing with a lot. Nothing really changed for me once I found out in terms of how I interact with my family. I still treat my grandparents as my parents and my mother as my sister, and that's how the outside world views it as well. It's just one of those things that nobody really brings up unless I mention it, because none of them want to hurt me. I'm lucky that I've been able to open up about it in therapy over the last few years, and I also have an unbelievable wife who's been a real rock and a great listener. I even contacted my biological dad a few years ago, which I never thought I'd end up doing until I actually started exploring my feelings fully. If I had to give anyone advice, I would say either tell the kid from a very early age or else wait until they pass the most difficult teenage years. In my view, that's the best for their mental well-being. That being said, if you think there is a reasonable likelihood of her finding out elsewhere, e.g. extended family or friends, ever needing a copy of her birth cert etc., then it is better to just go ahead and tell her rather than let her find out accidentally. If you do tell her, make sure you're completely open and frank about everything. It'll be incredibly difficult for you and your wife, but don't blame yourselves or anything like that. Don't dwell on the rape or your daughter's suicide. Those are issues for discussion after the initial shock has worn off. Answer any questions she has as openly and honestly as you can. My dad didn't want to tell me and was very abrupt with answers when I had questions in those first few weeks after I found out. I really picked up on this and just stopped asking questions and started bottling up things instead. I've found out since that he wasn't doing this on purpose, but was incredibly guilty about how he acted when I was born and had tried to convince everyone that I should be adopted. There is a lot of resentment in my family about this and other issues that I also picked up on. My mom overruled him and drove to the foster home where I was to bring me home in defiance of her husband's wishes. I don't hold it against him at all though, he's been a great dad. It was just a different time, thanks a bunch Catholic Ireland, and is one of the biggest regrets of his life. Best of luck whatever you decide to do, and don't worry about things changing. She's your daughter and you're her parents. Bond always overrides biology in my book, and anyone I ever talked to that this happened to as well. Wrote a storm. Just a few thoughts/ideas from a random internet stranger whose heart is breaking for your family. Maybe call a rape counselor. They have dealt with every aspect of rape and the destruction it causes. They can probably help you and your wife decide what's best for your family. And since I am a person who believes everyone can benefit from therapy, it might not be a bad idea to help you all deal with your justified hurt and anger. Does the biological male prisoner know they produced a child? Family medical information is so important if anything ever came up. I have to say she would probably want to know, and I say this over two different perspectives. One was a friend who proudly said, "Hell yes, I am adopted. My parents picked me with all my baggage, they picked me." My heart always melted when he said that. The other example is my cousin, who may very well be my cousin and my uncle. My grandfather raped all of his children. He is over 40 now, and no one would tell him who his father ever was. All his siblings know who their father is, and he wonders if that's why he was grandpa's favorite. Or was he just pitted because no one loved him enough to be his father? Etc. etc. The list goes on and destroys him a little more each year. Now everyone has passed and he can't get any answers. The never knowing the truth is hurting him more than knowing. He already accepted he was probably born out of rape in his 20s and just needs to know as he gets older. Josh. You guys are amazing people for choosing to adopt and raise your daughter. You're not lying to her, you are her parents, you are her dad. Just because you're also her grandfather doesn't mean any part of your current arrangement is a lie. It's extremely unlikely that anybody here has the experience to weigh in on your situation with any legitimate insight, so take everything that I say with a huge grain of salt. It probably makes sense to tell her at some point in her life. That's a conversation to be had between you, your wife, and likely a licensed, trusted third party who is trained in this area. But that has absolutely no bearing on the real situation that exists, today, in this moment, between this girl and the only parents she has in this life to love and care for you. She calls you dad because you're her dad. Accept that, own it, love it. Read it. This post got so much love from the community, incredibly. Hope it all has worked out. The end. Leave a comment what you think about the situation.